Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're going to catch up with Bailador a little bit and show you how he's developed since the last time we saw him. Now, I had a first really great ride on him a few months back where he really just got over his back and stayed very consistent. I called that the ride I'd been waiting for 3 years because it took quite a while. He's been an interesting case to work with, an extremely nervous horse, very broken over in the neck when we started. His back was very swayed. He had a big hole in his back from where a bad fitting saddle had literally eaten all the way to the bone. And he'd lost muscle in his back, and he would stand and vibrate his left hind leg. He couldn't really stand on it. And people thought he had some sort of neurological problems. We heard all kinds of theories of what it might be, but it really was just a matter of strength and pain. This horse's back was in very, very bad shape, so it took quite a while to get him there. But really now he's becoming very consistent, and I'm just starting to work him up into working gaits. So you can see now, and the people ask me all the time, when is a horse ready to come up from the stretch? Well, we start trying to come up from the stretch the minute we get them all the way down and get the full length of the neck. But some of them, like this one, who simply was just, he was really a rehab case in that we really had to solve a lot of physical issues before that was going to be able to happen and let him develop. But when they can, the answer is when they can, they will without any problem. If you see him here now, he's brought his pole up, but he's not just breaking over at the third vertebrae. Now you'll see me a few times throughout this ride have to give a little bit because he does start to bend over a little bit too much, and you'll see me immediately stretch him when I do that. But notice that he's able to come up without breaking at the third vertebrae. You can still see as we go by in silhouette there's still a bit of a dip in his back, but nothing compared to what it used to be like. And he's able to come up into a 4-beat walk. Now, when we first began this horse, the only way you could get a 4-beat walk at all was to stretch him all the way down. And if you tried to bring him up at all, he immediately went into a 2-beat type of incorrect walk with a very hollow back, like camel walking, as we call it. So when you see a horse and it's walking and both legs on the same side seem to be moving at the same time, like like a horse pacing, like pacers do on the track, that's a horse that's gone completely hollow and has become lateral in his walk. And you see how he starts to do that for one moment. He reacts to something there, comes a little too high, drops his back for a second, and starts to laterally walk. But what we can do now, you can see how I can clearly put my leg on him now, and he just bends right back into the frame. So, and when we first began this horse, you could not touch him with your legs at all. He'd been ridden without any legs, just pulling on the hands of the rider. And if you tried to touch him, especially with your left leg, he would just go completely out of his mind. But we can see now he's able to come up quite nicely into this working frame in the walk, be able to keep a good rhythm and even bend here. So that's exactly what we're looking at. So once again, the answer to that question is when can they come up? When they can, and that's the answer to the question. Now, horses that have been broken at the third vertebrae, like this one, had been so severely overflexed in the neck that some of those horses takes a while. You can just depend on the fact that if you have a horse and you've purchased a horse, for instance, or you're doing a rehab on a horse that's been given to you or something, it's severely broken over in the neck, much as most dressage horses today are, it's going to take at least a year in the stretch to heal that. So just know that right off the bat. So when I go out to look for horses for people to buy, the first thing I look at is whether or not they're broken over the third vertebrae. Because even if their backs are not in too bad a shape, if they are, I know that it's still going to be a year of stretching work before I'm going to be able to do much else. So you see how nicely he was able to come up into that working trot. Now you can still see he has a little overbend in his neck from time to time, but it's nothing compared to what it used to be. And he's able to come up and keep a pretty consistent contact and stay light in the reins. And wherever you're seeing here, he might get a little tense for a moment, but I'm able to go right back to the work on just the weight of the rein again. If I do a little lengthening, look how nicely he begins to come out from behind. Now I really like how much slower and deeper his rhythm is here. And once again, see as he comes around the corner, he wants to overflex a little bit, but you can see the neck isn't just really breaking over the way it's done in the past. And you can actually see him lifting his front end here. Look how light he looks in the front end. And of course, he's extremely light in the bridle there. He's not taking or pulling on me in any way. You can see just that little moment he tries to come up, how it interferes with the stride. Well, imagine if the horse is up like that all the time, what it's doing to the horses. So here he stays nicely in front of my leg. He's a little hesitant to come through, but he does come on through, and see how the back rounds on through as he does let his hindquarters come on through to the bridle. Now you'll see once in a while, see as he comes around the corner there, he wanted to react to something over there, and he got a little tighter in my hand than I liked him to do. And you can see now he has started to overflex a little bit. So I bring him right back up, just trying to keep that pole up there where it is. And then in a moment, I'm going to go right back to the stretch to let him stretch that neck out. The left side is always a little more difficult with this horse. As I said, when I first began this horse, he would not allow you to put your left leg on at all. He literally would just go out of his mind, and he would fight you for hours if you were willing to fight him over it. And that was kind of the impression that we got, from this horse, is that people had just fought with him and fought with him and fought with him, and he had won most of those battles. So he was at a place where he just wasn't going to listen to anything. But you see, once again, after that, he got a little curled up there on me, so I come right back to that stretch and get him back into the deep stretch. But notice how deeply he continues to trot under the body and how the neck just comes right out, and we're able to solve that problem. He goes right back down in that deep stretch. Now remember, this was a horse that when we began him, you literally could not go 20 feet without him spooking at something. He literally just went around the ring constantly spooking. He would pick something out and just decide that would be what he was going to spook at all day. Where he lived, where his owner lives, they had a lot of ground squirrels and that sort of thing, and he'd gotten to this point where every time he heard a little noise, away he would go. But what I'm really pleased here with is the canter work. So for the first time, what I experienced for a long time, a couple of years with this horse, is every time I tried to school the canter, his back would be so bad the next day that I'd have to call the chiropractor. So I'm really happy that I'm able to sustain some canter work on this horse. I haven't had any back problems, knock on wood, of course, in the course of doing this for the last few months. So I've been able to bring him up and start cantering and really schooling his canter for the first time without worrying about him just completely going lame on me the next day. So look how nice and quietly he stays there. And once again, look how nice and up he stays in the pole. So I keep the canter to a short period of time, as you see there. I ask for a little bit at a time, coming back to the stretch and always coming right back to the stretch again. We just have to remember that no matter what a level a horse is, they want to come back to the stretch. You have to let them, just like you do. If you go to the gym, you don't just keep doing the same thing over and over again. You have to let your body relax, let the muscles relax to bring the nutrients through the blood back into the muscles. Nicely back into the stretch again, how easily we're able to come back and forth. And once again, you'll notice that I'm riding him in a bridle. For the first year or two with this horse, we really pretty much had to ride him in a double bridle just for safety's sake, because you never knew when he was going to explode and you'd be in trouble. So I'm very happy to say he's nicely into a snaffle now and going quite lightly in it. Notice how nicely he came up there. And notice how he's even beginning to elevate his forehand as he trots. So he's beginning to develop a little bit of thrust. That is the push the hind legs have up into the back that lift the forehand off the ground. And actually the canter looks quite nicely uphill here. And very even 3-beat in the canter. And actually quite straight. That would have been the other thing when I first began working this horse. When you tried to canter him, he just, you felt like you were kind of on an egg beater that was totally crooked and bent in the middle in opposite directions. But now he's able to stay up quite nicely in this canter. And look how beautifully the top of his neck is developing. He's actually really developing muscle here. Really beautiful downwards transition without him dropping onto his forehand. And now I do a little lengthening. Got a little bit of resistance there, but comes right on through and swings through and stays right in the bridle for me. And you'll see once in a while when he gets a little tense, especially to the left, which is his worst direction, you'll see me just have to put him into a shoulder in occasionally, but that's kind of all it takes to get him back into the frame again, as opposed to him jumping halfway across the arena with you. Now, something that you might notice here, which I noticed myself, because this horse is beginning to change, the front of the saddle is coming up because he's beginning to develop there. So I'm also noticing, watching this tape, that I need to rebalance his saddle again and get the back up a little bit and the front lower it a little bit, because it's putting me a little bit in a chair seat. Just something to point out. So when you feel like your legs are getting a little bit ahead of you, it could very well be that your horse is beginning to change, which is what we want to have happen. If you're doing this work correctly, you should be having to refit your saddle, at least every 3 months, because your horses will change that much. Beautiful lengthening right there. See how he just comes right through from behind? That would have been impossible just not even that long ago. And look how nicely he stays. He's not breaking at the third vertebra there, and goes right back into the stretch again. How nice and long that neck gets and how he really starts to swing over his back. Always watching those diagonal pairs, is the horse in rhythm? Always remembering that when we talk about a horse being in rhythm, we're talking about the two ends of the horse. So notice as I bring him right back up how he begins to lift that front end right off the ground. So that's what I mean. He's beginning to develop thrust. Thrust is the degree through which the horse pushes up through the back off of its hind legs, and that's actually what lifts the front end and makes the front end of the horse light when we get real collection. Here he does a nice little lengthening across the diagonal there. Comes right back into the bridle. Very nicely there. Notice I come right back to the stretch after that. So every time I ask the horse for the most extreme things that I'm doing, notice that I come right back to the stretch right after that. So I just don't keep doing it over and over again. Biggest mistake so many people make in riding is they just don't recognize the point at which they've gotten something a little better, and they just keep doing it over and over again. And when you do that, the horse loses the sense of of right and wrong. When am I right? You know, and then they start getting very angry about the work that we do. In other words, the rider must be judicious in all of this and reward little improvements instead of trying to make giant improvements every day. So the only really dramatic horse change you can make in a horse on any given day is simply getting them over their back, taking a hollow horse and getting it to stretch into the contact and up over its back. That's never been there before. Everything else comes very slowly. And the more you hammer away at things by trying to do things over and over again, the more resistance you begin to get out of the horse. So what you really should do at the moment you feel resistance, I mean, you try to get through it a little bit, but if you can't get through it, you go right back to the stretch and you realize that it's a physical problem. Horses are very willing, as you see this one. Now that he's physically able to carry me around the arena, he's pretty much happy to do it. But when I began with this horse, he was in so much physical pain that it was simply an impossibility. You know, he was never going to be comfortable till we got him out of physical pain. So we had to spend a very long time just rehabbing his body just so that he's out of pain, so that when we ride him, that, you know, the origins of his difficulties, you know, if you get on the horse and immediately every time you're in the saddle, he's feeling pain through his back, well, the horse is going to react very badly, one way or another. A sensitive horse is going to become, you know, extremely explosive, and a horse that's dull is just going to completely dull out to sort of dull their mind to the pain. But once again, look how beautifully he's swinging under the body here in this stretch. Exactly what we want to do. So it kind of refreshes the horse. Think of it that way. You know, if you're working on something that's very difficult, and even sometimes we make mistakes, and when we do that, we have to come right back into the stretch again. And the stretch kind of erases the horse's attitude towards us. So realize that a lot of the horses, most of the problems that we encounter with horses, most of the difficulties, are from people simply not recognizing what the horse is capable of doing and what it's not capable of doing. So here I do a little sitting trot on him. A few strides, let him carry my weight, and he did that quite well. Notice how beautifully each time he's come back up. And notice how nice and floppy his ears are. They're not pinned back like he's pissed off, but he's actually listening to me instead of his eyeballs circling his head looking for something to look at. And that was kind of the MO with this horse. Is, you know, you'd work him a little bit and he'd be good for a bit, and then as soon as he decided he wasn't going to work anymore, he would just shut off on you and start trying to spook more and more and more. That sort of became his MO. Which tells me somewhere along the way he got away with that kind of behavior. That's why they repeat the behavior. So he sort of had learned if I act like I'm completely out of my mind, they're going to stop asking me to do anything. But it's a delicate balance because we have to be sure that the horse actually is out of pain before we ask him to do anything. In his case, you know, it just took a long time to get there. Some of you may want to go back and look at the early videos of this horse where we even show you the holes in his back and that sort of thing, so you could actually see what physical shape he was in when we began the process of bringing him back. But look how easily now he comes back up into that working trot. He has back end hasn't fallen out behind him anywhere, staying up, and how easily I can change the rein. Another little lengthening. He swings a little bigger each time I get that lengthening coming through. So you notice how I'm constantly changing up what I'm doing. I'm asking As I begin to work the horse up, I ask for more difficult things, but I keep coming back to the stretch when I feel the horse getting tired. Some of the signs of getting tired, if you're working with young horses and you get them swinging and working over the back, you'll hear them start to forge. And if you hear horses starting to forge, you want to back off a little bit. That always means that they're just simply don't have enough strength, or they've gotten so tired they can't get the front end out of the way of the back end, and we're trying to get them to swing through in the back. So that's a good sign that you need to back off a little bit or be done for the day, so to speak. So I do back a little more sitting trot there, getting used to my weight. And here I'm actually going to go large in the trot. And I'm actually able to sit to the trot halfway around the arena there, which for him is a big improvement. Tries to look at the cameraman there a little bit, but you see I'm able to put my leg on and put him right back into the contact again. So I'm able to sustain a sitting trot with him all the way around the arena, something I've never been able to do before. As soon as you sat on him, his back would just collapse out from underneath you, and you would feel like you were on a pile driver. So for him, that was absolutely fantastic to be able to come up into that trot like that and maintain that with me sitting to the trot. And of course, I come right back to the stretch after that. And you can see how when he comes across the diagonal there on the left lead, how he wants to kind of get a little excited. He starts to do his old thing of trying to resist my left leg, but he gives it up very quickly and comes right back into the stretch again. Now I try the same thing on this side. So he wants to hollow a little bit there. It's a little more difficult to sustain the sitting trot in this direction, but he does it. Notice that the back leg didn't fall out from underneath him. Kept his back up underneath me throughout. So this is a big breakthrough for this horse, for him to be able to sustain my weight like this and not just completely collapse out from underneath me. So I was very, very pleased with that. That's the longest I've ever set to the trot on this horse. And he was able to sustain it and come right back to the trot again. And of course, you see how I come right back to that stretch in the trot once again. So I couldn't be more happy with him. He's really developing beautifully. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride with our good friend Bailador, who I hope has inspired a lot of you to realize that you can take horses that are quite difficult and do wonderful things with them if you're ready to take the time. And look what a nice, beautiful downwards transition he makes there into a nice square halt. Couldn't be happier with this boy today. And back into a stretch, and of course we finish in the walk and the stretch. Will Faerber from Art to Ride. See you next time.